Today we are answering the question, are demons real? I remember that I was absolutely terrified of demons as a child, especially demonic possession. I'm going to be telling you about an encounter with a demon, demonic possession to be specific, as we address the question, are demons real? We're also going to be taking a look at the religious interpretation, the occult and Luciferian interpretation, the psychological interpretation to find out what these things are, what they are, and what it has to do with us. It's going to be really good. We're going to start right away, but please first make sure that you like and subscribe. As always, remember that, hey, this channel is about getting information out there so that people can learn to think in new ways and higher ways, and so that we can literally raise consciousness through spreading knowledge. So when you hit like and subscribe, it just takes a minute. It takes a second, not a minute. It takes less than a second. You could probably do it. It helps out a lot. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoy my work and you want to see my work grow and help me create bigger and better videos and reach more people, support over on Patreon. It helps out a lot. It's patreon.com/MorgueOfficial. And you get access to all of our members only videos. And you can also get access to that by supporting at tier 2 or higher on YouTube, hitting the join button right below this video. Also, be aware, there are a lot of scammers out there in the comments pretending to be me, saying to join my WhatsApp, join my Telegram. They're even DMing people on different platforms. I don't have a WhatsApp. I don't have a Telegram, so don't fall for that. That's not me. Also, there are people and groups out there who don't like what we're doing, who don't like what I'm doing, and are spreading a lot of misinformation and disinformation about me and our group and what we do. So just use your logic and reason and don't fall for the BS. All right, here we go, my friends. Demonic possession. Now, I'm going to tell you, for those who don't know, I grew up in a strict Christian household, and a lot of it was very psychologically traumatizing. One of the things that I was most terrified of was the idea of demonic possession, so much so that I had countless nights where I just could not fall asleep because I was absolutely terrified of the concept of demons and demonic possession. Because remember, children believe that this is true. This can result in RTS, or religious trauma syndrome. It was absolutely terrifying. So, are demons real? Is demonic possession real? What are demons? What do they have to do with reality? What do they have to do with existence? And, the occult and the esoteric world talks about demons a lot. It's a very big part of esoteric and occult systems. So what's going on with that? What's going on there? Is it real? Is it not? That's what we're exploring today. And what I want to do is I'm going to bring up this article on medium.com. And this article is called "I Didn't Believe in Demons Until I Met One Face to Face." Now, this is a very interesting article, and I'm going to be telling you exactly why. Now, real quick, this is by an individual named Dan Foster. Dan Foster over on medium.com. So I'm going to be reading some excerpts from their article, and if you enjoy it, go support them. Go give them a follow over on medium.com. So their article says, "It's easy to deny the existence of demons until you find yourself staring at one." So let's take a look at this. And what I think is really interesting about this is that this individual says that they weren't really a believer in demons. So they say, it's easy to deny the existence of demons until you find yourself staring at one. I certainly was no believer. Such phenomena were reserved for Hollywood horror films that have no qualms about inviting us into the supernatural, and we willingly enter into that world because we know that it's not real. But when you find yourself in conversation with a demon, it's difficult to continue to say that it's not real. So we're going to see exactly what's going on here. This individual, I think, one reason why I like this individual story is because they're coming at it from a point of view where they apparently didn't have a prior belief in demons. So let's see exactly what happened here. So Dan says, "Back in the day when I was a young leader in a Christian youth group." Okay, so this is interesting. So back in the day when I was a young leader in a Christian youth group, I found myself on a summer camp with a bunch of rowdy teenagers. Couple things here. First of all, I find it interesting. I just want to preemptively say I don't know anything about Dan. I don't know him or his background or what he believes in or whatnot. But I find it interesting that Dan said that he didn't believe in demons, yet during this incident he was a Christian youth group leader. So it's not impossible for one to be a Christian and not believe in demons. But most, at least fundamentalist Christians, do believe in demons. So I think that's a little strange, but I don't know him and his beliefs, but it's a little odd. Also, this is very relatable because I went to Christian camps like this. I went to these Christian camps, did not like them, not a fan, don't recommend it. If you ever seen the documentary Jesus Camp, go watch it, you'll see why. The ones I went to weren't quite that bad, but they were still basically Christian indoctrination, brainwashing camps is what they were. I'll talk about it at some point, but that's a story for another time. But anyway, so this individual was a youth leader at a summer camp, and he says, our job, according to the evangelical tradition, was to get these young people saved. Now, what did I say about it being a indoctrination system? So he continues by saying, and what better way to do that by running a summer camp? So insidious, so sneaky. It's like, oh wow, we want to get kids. Let's do this fun summer camp, but inject this brainwashing curriculum within it. So I don't know anything about this particular summer camp. I just can speak to my own experience. Exhausted yet energized kids caught up in a whirlwind of emotions just somehow seemed more receptive to hearing about the perils of hell. Yeah, that's another thing. Use a technique to terrify children into becoming saved. If you don't believe in God, if you are not saved, you are going to be tortured for all of eternity. But think about how damaging that is to the psyche. Think about how damaging that is to my mind, or to the mind and my mind. It's not healthy. It's not good. It's not okay. But I'm not going to, go on a long rant about this. I'll try not to. It's just this kind of stuff is triggering because I experience this stuff firsthand. And it's one of the main reasons why that I have devoted my life to finding truth, was being engaged in a very indoctrinating environment showed me that it's important to be able to see through the lies that are pretty much everywhere. There are so many different conditioning systems all over the place, and most people are living in a conditioned and brainwashed state. That's why different processes like neogenesis is important, to be able to decondition the mind, to make sure that one can think clearly and critically and for themselves, rationally and logically. But anyway, Foster continues by saying, I cringe at it now, but it seemed like we were doing something great back then. So I like that. That's cool. Again, I don't know anything about Dan, but it seems like Dan, at least now, thinks that that's not a good idea. That's great. Good. I like that. So he continues by saying, but it all came to a screeching halt when, in the middle of a particularly rousing chorus of praise, a young girl suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream and bolted from the room. Straight out the door she went and just kept on running off into a forest surrounding the campsite. So now we have this girl who just screams in the middle of a praise worship event, and she runs outside into the forest. An impromptu crisis meeting was called amongst the leadership team, with myself and one other youth leader tasked with searching for the missing girl in the surrounding forest. With flashlights in hand, we set off into the dark forest in search of a crazy screaming girl. They only sent 2 people? I think that's a little weird. If a girl runs into a dark... I'm assuming this is... Well, yeah, they had flashlights, so I'm assuming this is night and dark. And if you're in the middle of the woods and a girl just up and screams and runs into the woods... I feel like maybe send more than 2 people. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I think that's a little weird, though. I feel like more than 2 people should go for something like this. I don't know. I don't know how. Maybe she didn't go that far. So I don't know. I don't know the details. But anyway, let's keep reading. Dan says, we called her name as we went. Amanda, Amanda, it's okay. It's safe to come out. Deeper we went into the woods. Amanda. There was a rustling in the bushes nearby, and I swung around and shone the torch directly at it. Sure enough, the girl was there, but she was not standing upright. She was down on all fours, hunched over like an animal. She glared unblinkingly at us. "Amanda," I said, "it's time to come inside." But the girl didn't budge. She looked straight at me and opened her mouth to speak. When the words came out, it was not the voice of a sweet young teenage girl who spoke. Rather, a deep voice came out of her mouth. It was, in fact, a man's voice. "So you're Dan Foster," the voice said. "The others told me about you." Up until this point, I'd found the whole experience a bit creepy, but now I was positively freaked out. I was convinced that I was dealing with something supernaturally beyond what I had ever experienced before. All right, so we're going to continue this, and I'm going to tell you what I think about all this, especially with my background in Christianity and studying esoterica and the occult and philosophy and all that. So I'm going to be telling you my opinion on all this. But let's continue. So keep this in mind. They found this girl. She's on all fours, and she says in a deep voice, "So you're Dan Foster. The others told me about you." And so this is very unsettling, as you can imagine, to Dan. And he says, "And so began the exorcism." All right, so let's just continue. But, however, I do want to say, maybe medical attention, maybe not an exorcism, maybe some medical attention would be good. Anyway, but let's keep going. "So my friend was equipped with a full arsenal of Bible verses that he began to hurl at the girl in short succession like a semi-automatic gunfire." So poor girl. Anyway, "The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. Resist the devil and he will flee from you." One by one, he rained down fiery arrows of biblical truth on the girl, who became increasingly fidgety and agitated. Again, I mean, if someone's having a mental health crisis, probably that's going to be expected. Anyway, let's hold on. "With ever-increasing intensity and volume, he built in glorious crescendo to the climax of his counterattack against the forces of evil, until finally he shouted, 'In the name of Jesus Christ, come out of her!' Much to my surprise, all this rebuking seemed to have some effect. The girl's demeanor seemed to change. She softened, she blinked. It was like she came to. The clashing of spiritual swords and shields gave way to stillness. 'Amanda, it's okay. You're safe now,' the other youth group leader said softly, with a kind of gentle compassion in complete contrast to the yelling that had ensued only seconds before. Amanda nodded. 'I'm sorry,' she said, in her own voice again. 'I don't know what came over me.' She stood up, and we walked together back to the campsite. She seemed to me to be completely normal again." So this is another thing that we're going to answer. If, why is it that the exorcism apparently worked? So we have a girl that's apparently possessed by a demon, verses were thrown at her. She became fidgety when they rebuked the demon in the name of Jesus Christ. She seemed to be better and recover. So here's the interesting part, though. It says the repossession. So this was later on, a few weeks later, okay? It says it was now standard practice to have a youth group leader with eyes on Amanda just in case something should happen again. So this is a few weeks later. Apparently Amanda's been okay during this time. I don't know. But someone is assigned to her to keep an eye on her. And it happened again. As the worship music built to a frenzy, Amanda's demeanor changed. She became twitchy and irritated. The person she was assigned to sensed the danger and gently tried to lead Amanda out of the room. Stephen was his name, and he was one of the biggest, strongest guys I've ever known. Stephen was 6 feet 8 inches and had muscles in places that I didn't even have places. Don't know what that means. He was one strong dude. So you can imagine our surprise when Amanda, the 5'0", slightly built teenager, physically picked up Stephen and threw him out of her way as she exited the building. So she picked up this guy and hurled him, apparently. Um, so the same sort of thing happened. Someone came in, did an exorcism, and she was okay, I guess. So what was going on here? The Dan Foster writes, I was told that Amanda had invited evil spirits into her life. Right? So what's going on? Why is Amanda being possessed? Dan wants to know why Amanda's being possessed. Amanda probably had questions too, and this is probably what they told Amanda. I don't know if it's what they told Amanda, but I can only assume this is what they told Amanda because this is what they told Dan. That she had invited evil spirits into her life, either accidentally or on purpose, through her own dabbling in occult practices. Because apparently dabbling in occult practices, the demons would manifest when they became irritated by the presence of God in a worship session, for example. We were casting out the demons in Jesus' name like good Christians are supposed to, but the demons kept coming back because Amanda continued in her sin, not giving up the practices that were inviting the evil spirits into her life in the first place. Since that is what the church leaders told me, that is what I believed. So the explanation as to why Amanda kept becoming repossessed is because she was continuing to dabble in these apparently occult practices. Now, to Dan's benefit, Dan says, I'm not sure if I believe this anymore. I view this explanation with a fair degree of skepticism. I should look into Dan a little more. Dan seems like an interesting guy. I don't really know where he stands or what he believes, but it seems like he's skeptical. And, you know, when he said that he cringed at the idea of teaching kids about hell or something, that, you know, that's a good sign. I don't know. I should see what's up, but interesting. But here's the clincher here. All right. So it says the aftermath. I bumped into Amanda many years later, decades later, in fact. She is happy. She is married. She is still a Christian. But listen to this. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia quite early on in her life, thanks to an abundance of these kinds of demonic manifestations. Her medication enables her to live a reasonably, functionally normal life. So that's one thing that, so we're going to answer these questions, right? We're going to talk about how, you know, she what's going on here, why she acted this way, why her voice changed, why she was able to pick someone up, etc. But I want you to, you know, think about it, because there's a lot of people who believe in this sort of stuff. If she was actually possessed by a demon, why would medication help? Like, does medication really help demonic possession? So the fact that one is diagnosed with schizophrenia and they have medication that helps them is very indicative of to what is going on here. And yeah, so I like this. Dan says, question, if something that the church explains as a spiritual affliction can be cured or managed by medication, is it really a spiritual problem? Or is it actually a physical or mental illness that we are wrongly attributing to a spiritual source? Dare I ask, could it be both? So I like, Dan seems at least like that he's exploring ideas outside of Christianity, which is cool. I like that. There's just a little more to, I'm going to read this real quick because I want to actually start talking about this, and I want to get to the idea of like why demons exist in esoterica and the occult and the Lucifer. We're going to look at the Luciferian interpretation of this as well. So we're going to kind of look at the other end of the spectrum here. So last thing I want to read is Dan says, it's highly likely that in Jesus Christ's day, people with their limited knowledge of science, psychology, and medicine may very well have attributed many naturally occurring afflictions with demonic activity. So, yeah, that's the thing, is that people who had schizophrenia or other mental afflictions in those days were likely attributed to demonic possession. So what's going on here? Are demons real? Is this a real demonic possession? So right off the bat, this depends on how one defines demon. Like, what is a demon? What is it? How does it work? Is it possible for another soul to inhabit another soul's person, another soul's body? We're going to take a look at this. But first, I want to look at this specific instance that Dan is talking about. Now, so this specific instance, again, can easily be explained by the phenomena of schizophrenia, which is extremely well documented and well studied. Now, the idea of, you know, a girl being able to pick someone up and hurl them, this is also something that has been very well studied through adrenaline rush. It's known as, what's it called? It's known as hysterical strength. You might have read about, you know, a mother who sees their child in danger. They'll suddenly be able to, you know, move a car or something crazy like that. So someone who's in an altered state of mind, having an adrenaline rush, that's not completely out of the ordinary. Her voice apparently changing to a man's voice. So here is where one has to weigh what's more likely. So, according to Dan, her voice became a man's. So what's more likely? That she was possessed by a demon that spoke through her, and thus that is why her voice was deep. Or maybe Dan just misremembered, or she spoke in a low guttural tone because she was in an altered mental state and it sounded like a man's. Like which one is more of a likely scenario? It's more likely that there's some memory issue, or she was just talking in a lower tone because she was in an altered state, which is perfectly reasonable and something that I'm sure happens during these kinds of things. And another thing that one has to ask is that with all this stuff going on, you know, you would think that there would be a lot more like evidence of this sort of thing, a lot more video evidence of this sort of thing. And I know that there are videos of demonic possessions, but it's all stuff that could be attributed to schizophrenia and things like that. There's no video of someone having the number 666 scrawled across their chest, or I don't know, something that would be like, oh, clearly this is demonic possession as described in the Bible. But let's take a look at demonic possession in general, and just demons in general, and the idea of demons. So what are demons? There are many different ways that one could think about this sort of thing. Now, if we're talking about demons as described literally in the Bible as being servants of Satan that are trying to get you to sin and go to hell, that doesn't exist. There is no evidence for that whatsoever, and it's very easy to show that the Bible is false and not true, and that the God of the Bible doesn't exist, and all those stories are fake. So one doesn't have to worry about hell or demons or things like in terms of that. But can demons exist in another kind of way? So the psychologist Carl Jung looked at beings like this as being symbolic for structures in the psyche. And so we talk a lot about Gnosticism, and Gnosticism had different types of beings. They have the eons and the archons. And the eons and the archons had different functions. Eons were things like wisdom and thought and conceptualization and idea. You notice these are all things to do with the mind. And then archons had to do with things like ignorance and wrath and envy and I forget all the different things, but a lot of negative mental attributes. So according to Gnosticism, what one has to do is defeat the archons so that they can achieve gnosis or enlightenment. And what this really is about is these things are representative of structures in your own mind. Eons, or beings of light, are positive structures like conceptual thought and ideas and imagination and wisdom and all that sort of stuff. And then you have archons that represent things like wrath and ignorance. And so when one overcomes wrath or ignorance, they're defeating the archons. But these are symbolic representations of our own internal structures. Now, are there actually higher beings out there that have malevolent intentions for humanity? Yeah, I believe that that is absolutely true. And we're going to take a look at the whole occult, esoteric, and Luciferian interpretation of this in just a minute. But I just want to talk about this real quick, is that, yes, I believe that there are beings out there that are highly evolved minds, inner systems of energy, that are interested in humanity in one way or another and have probably not the best intentions for humanity. I don't have time to get into the whole details as to why that is. I've explained it in other videos. But I believe that they exist and they're out there, but they're not the demons described in the Bible. They're not like the servants of devil who are trying to get you to go to hell or anything like that. I believe that they are beings that want to see humanity evolve into a certain way in which that they can be manipulated. And so the question is, though, could these beings possess humans? And I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that it is possible for, well, first of all, I don't think that they would want to. Like, what would really, as you can see with all the cases of possession, it's not like they have very good control of the body. They're just flailing around all over the place and whatnot. So it's not very, it wouldn't be, like, why would they want to do that? That just doesn't seem like a very good idea. And then also, I highly doubt that that is possible. I believe that it is very likely that a Zeta has a unique association with an avatar and its interface. And I'll actually be explaining why. I don't want to get into too much of the details of why that is in this video right here, right now, because it'd take a while. But I will be talking about that in the future. So if that's something you're interested in, look forward to that. And also, I want to say, well, how come when someone said Jesus Christ, she was better and she she snapped out of it? Well, if we understand this as having to do with the psyche, then if one associates Jesus Christ as an archetype with all things that are good and calming and loving and beautiful, etc., bringing up that archetypal pattern absolutely has the possibility of calming someone down. So in that case, it's not necessarily that it's because people are like, oh, well, how come when we say the name of Jesus Christ, the demon leaves? Well, it's because people are Christians and they have that association. So it would be like if you believed in the Buddha, then the name of the Buddha would do it. If you believed in, I don't know, name, pick any god or deity, Zeus or whatever, if someone believed in that, then that's what would do it, because this archetypal pattern is calming to the mind. People have associations with this, and that's what it does. It brings up that concept and that archetype, and it has an effect. It has an effect on that psyche. So I want to show you the occult interpretation here, and specifically I want to bring up which is on a website called theorderofdarkarts.com. And this is, so I don't know anything about this website, by the way, other than I briefly looked at this article and I was like, good, this sounds like a good article. So, I'm not, don't think that I'm vouching for this site, or I don't know anything about this site. But anyway, it's on a website called the Order of the Dark Art, theorderofdarkarts.com, which is about this Luciferian system. So now, right away, they're calling, there's the article's titled Collective Unconscious, the Unseen Ocean of Shared Experiences. So this is really cool. This is now talking about the collective unconscious, which is an idea of Carl Jung's, and understanding it in terms of the occult and esoterica. And Carl Jung, we just talked about, was the individual who really promulgated the term archetype in psychology, and that idea of these patterns that exist in the mind that have become associated with different symbols and narratives and motifs throughout the ages. So it says, meanwhile, Jung's concept of the collective unconscious aligns with many occult beliefs. So what is the collective unconscious? Well, it says this shared reservoir of experiences, symbols, and archetypal characters is thought to span across all individuals and cultures, transcending personal consciousness. It provides a common language through which we can understand and influence the world. So, in a nutshell, the collective unconscious is the idea that humanity has a shared unconscious reservoir. In New Age terms, this is often associated with the Akashic records. But in Jungian and psychology terms, this has to do with the fact, like, everyone has a personal unconscious. You have your conscious mind, those things that you are aware of, and your preconscious mind, those things that you can easily bring into consciousness if you want to. And then your unconscious, which are those things that exist within you, but that you don't have conscious access to, that you probably aren't even aware exist at all, but they're a part of you. Now, the collective unconscious is the shared unconsciousness of humanity, and it's a reservoir of many of the extremely influential patterns and archetypes of existence. So the collective unconscious is the sort of source of unconscious information that all humans share. And to give you an example of this, for example, let's say that someone is tripping on LSD. And as always, remember, don't do anything dangerous, don't do anything illegal, etc. But let's say that someone is tripping on LSD. And let's say they're not religious at all. They're an atheist. But let's say they're tripping and they start seeing symbols of Jesus and the Buddha and the pyramids and Egyptian gods and things that they've never even, let's say they see an Egyptian god that they've never even studied about, or something like that, right? They're just seeing all this religious imagery. Well, according to the theory of Carl Jung, this would be not be coming from their personal unconscious, but the collective unconscious. These ideas that have been such a part of human history and knowledge that have been ingrained within all of us as a collective. Now, if we understand reality to be non-physical, this is easily explainable because we know that we are all connected via the source and the frequency domain. So ultimately, we're all connected together and we all have access to these patterns that have developed. There's also a materialist interpretation of this that has to do with the structure of the brain, and that these ideas have become just part of the brain structure over time, that have been passed on. So there is a materialist way to understand this as well. But from our perspective, these are mental patterns, energetic patterns that exist within all of us, and they have developed throughout history, through humanity. And so these can be accessed. So we have these various patterns, and these patterns are expressed in different symbols. So the feeling of love and collective good might be expressed by symbols like Jesus Christ and the Buddha, whereas symbols of domination and control might be represented by symbols like Satan. So you have these different aspects of the mind, different programs, different parts of the psyche that are represented by these archetypal symbols. And a good way to understand this is, I think a really easy way to I think a lot of times people get kind of confused or overwhelmed by the idea of archetypes, but they're kind of a complex idea, but here's what I think is an easy way to understand them. If you imagine your mind as being like a phone, the apps are like archetypes. Archetypes have a specific function, a specific thing that they do. Like the Satan archetype would be to do with dominance and control and individuality and ego, whereas the Christ archetype would have to do with loving people, loving yourself, loving the world, the collective good, doing good deeds, doing good works. These are archetypes that are patterns that are represented in a certain way. So you can imagine them kind of like apps. Every app on your phone has a certain thing that it does. You have an app that allows you to take pictures. You have an app that allows you to take notes. You have an app that allows you to go on social media. You have an app that allows you to do photo editing. You have all these different apps. They all do different things. Now, these apps have different symbols and names. A photo editing app might have the symbol of a star and be called, Star Edit or something. I don't know. Now, the symbol and the name isn't what the app is. It just represents the app. The app isn't literally a star, and it's not and the name Star Edit isn't literally its name. These are symbols that we associate with it, for what it actually does, which allows you to edit photos on your phone. Archetypes are kind of the same sort of thing in a similar fashion. They are a certain function. They're a certain pattern. They're a certain program. They do a certain thing. And we represent them with symbols and names like Satan or Christ or all the different demons. If you look up a demonology book and you look at all the different names of the demons and the descriptions of demons, you're basically looking at different apps of the mind. Whether you're looking at demons or angels. For example, like in Kabbalah, in the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you call on the 4 archangels, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, Gabriel. And you call on the 4 archangels. And what this ritual is doing is you are calling on these archetypes of your mind, which is basically like you're activating the apps in your mind. So, Michael can represent will and power. And another one represents more like intuition. Another one represents reason and logic. And another one can represent, caring and nurture and growth. These are different programs, different apps that have different functions. When you want to, tap into your strength and your will, that's when you would call on Michael. And this is just the activation of that app in your mind. Now, that's just a helpful way to do that, to access that. You don't have to do that. Of course, you can access your will and your strength without calling on Michael, but that is a method that some people use to activate that aspect of their psyche. So archetypes are apps of the mind, and their symbolic representation is like their icon, and their name is like the name of the app. So I think that's important to remember. People get too obsessed with thinking that the symbol and the name is what they are. Oh, Satan. No, it just represents a certain function. So it says, for the Luciferian, this concept's, so talking about the collective unconscious and archetypes, it says, for the Luciferian, this concept aligns with the belief in the self's divine potential, with Lucifer as the symbol of enlightenment and the individual's capacity to tap into universal knowledge. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about here, there's a lot of different types of belief systems out there. I have not studied this website in depth. I don't know what type of Luciferianism they are. But I am assuming it very much sounds like, and this is common in the occult and Luciferianism, is to make a big divide between Lucifer and Satan. In a lot of occult traditions, especially in Luciferian traditions, Lucifer is not Satan. So I just want to clear that up because that's important for what we're about to talk about. In these traditions, Lucifer and Satan are actually opposites. So you can think of Satan as the red horned devil that looks evil, and it's associated with the ego and domination and power and control. Whereas Lucifer is symbolized as an angel of light, usually androgynous, and is associated with knowledge and wisdom and collective empowerment and things like that. So in this context, the Lucifer and Christ archetype are actually similar archetypes and can be considered the same archetype, in my opinion. Lucifer and Christ are the same archetype, meaning they both have the same function. They're both the same app, just different icons. Right? Lucifer and Satan are different icons for the same app. Satan is a completely different icon and a completely different app and a completely different purpose. So they're saying here that this concept aligns with the belief in the self's divine potential, with Lucifer as the symbol of enlightenment and the individual's capacity to tap into universal knowledge. So they're saying that for them, Lucifer is the symbol, the representation of what? Of what function? The function of enlightenment and the capacity to tap into universal knowledge. So what in these terms, what is the Lucifer app? The Lucifer app is tapping into universal knowledge and enlightenment, the capacity to do that. And this is represented by the symbol of Lucifer. Tapping into the collective unconscious can illuminate this path, drawing forth insights from the archetypal figures, including various demons and Lucifer himself. Communicating with these figures allow practitioners to delve deeper into their psyche, connect with collective wisdom, and empower their practices. And so, yeah, that is the thing. You can evoke these symbols, or invoke these symbols. You can do rituals with these symbols. You can converse with these symbols. But the thing is that these are aspects of yourself, aspects of your psyche, because your unconscious does not communicate in words. Your unconscious communicates in symbols. When you go to sleep and dream at night, your dream world is created from your unconscious mind. And often your unconscious is trying to communicate something to you, but it doesn't communicate in words. It doesn't go, hey, you know what? You should probably work on self-care. Instead, it'll generate an archetypal scenario of your mother or someone else that represents care to you. And there'll be some, dream scenario with your mother. On an even deeper level, it might represent, in a more universal archetypal sense, as Gaia, the great mother, Earth, something like that. But again, just different icons for the same app, whether it's the icon of your mother or the icon of Mother Earth, Gaia, or some other goddess, or whatever you associate with care. That's how your mind communicates. So when you are communicating with Lucifer, various demons, various angels, what you're communicating with is the manifestation of these apps in your mind, in your psyche. And this is one way that some people choose to be able to access these apps. When they want to have more creativity, they will find a demon or an angel or some entity associated with creativity, and they might do a ritual surrounding that entity and go into a state where they are perhaps conversing with that entity. But this is a conversation with one's own mind. It's like going into a lucid dream-like state where one is now communicating with that aspect of the mind. Now, not everyone has to do this. You don't have to do rituals if you don't want, if you don't want to. Not at all. There are people access these archetypes in a lot of different ways. If you look at like a lot of business and entrepreneurial communities, they have a ton of way for doing the same thing, but they do so in like NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or waking up at a certain time and taking a cold shower and do like whatever rituals they do, right? There's a lot of rituals that are done and that's why a lot of, individuals who are entrepreneurs and do that stuff can be really successful, because they are accessing these aspects of themselves through modern rituals, getting up at a certain time, taking a cold shower, doing their, they have little, I forget, there's different meditation type sessions that have a special name that they do. But, and I'm not making fun of it. I don't know why I said it like that. It's effective and it works. And they can be powerful methods. So what I'm trying to show is that it doesn't necessarily have to do with, I'm going to contact this particular demon. You could just as easily modernize it. So it says here, Jungian archetypes primal universal symbols, remember archetypes, they're apps, they're programs, are evident in various forms in Luciferianism. To Jung, these archetypes acted as psychological organs inherent in all. So psychological organs, psychological mental structure. What is an organ? An organ is a part of your body that has a function. So a mental organ is a psychic structure, a structure in the psyche that has a particular function. So these archetypes all have particular functions. In Luciferian and other left-hand path traditions, demons often embody these archetypes, serving as external manifestations of these internal forces. For instance, Lucifer the light bearer embodies the self archetype, the unification of the unconscious and conscious mind, representing the individual's fulfilled potential. So I want to say something real quick, is that when they say self, they use self with a capital S. So self with a capital S in Jungian psychology doesn't have to do with your ego self. It has to do with your transcendent self. It has to do with the totality of your psyche. The self is the archetype of archetypes. It's basically the mind. It's the mind. In our scenario, it's the phone, or the operating system. If we want to get away from like the material aspect of it, it's the operating system. It's what houses the apps. It's the all. It's the totality. It's the archetype of archetypes. Excuse me. So they're saying for them, Lucifer represents the self with a capital S. And what does Satan usually represent? Satan usually represents the ego. So a lot of Jungian psychologists interpret Satan as representing the ego. And this is often associated in Gnosticism with Yaldabaoth, or the creator god of the Bible. So the creator god of the Bible is often associated with Satan in Gnostic traditions as being an evil being that keeps individuals trapped in the material world, called Yaldabaoth. And so this being, which is a satanic being, but the creator god of the Bible, is in Jungian psychology often associated with the ego function. Why? Well, because the God of the Bible goes, I am the only God and there is no God but me. When in Gnosticism, there actually is. There's a much higher God, the one mind that encompasses all things, which is like what we've been talking about, the archetype of archetypes. And for that's a lot like the ego, because the ego goes, oh, I am the true self and the only self. You know, people who identify with their ego go, oh, that's who I am. I am this particular person with these particular identities in this particular life. I am a doctor and a mother and a sister. I'm, 5'8". I'm, all the different attributes that an individual would identify with in that particular lifetime. That's the ego self. But is that the true self? No, that's not the true self. The true self encompasses the entirety of one's personality, the entirety of one's mind, diving into unconscious forces, and for us, across lifetimes. So we've had many different lifetimes. So it's even all the different lifetime experience and accumulation is all part of the true self, the higher self, the overarching self. The ego self is just the center of consciousness, the center of one's field of consciousness. It's extremely important. The ego is very important. It's critical. It's crucial. And it's actually important to have a strong ego. Strong ego doesn't mean being egotistical. That's very important. Often people with weak egos are egotistical, because people with weak egos can't make decisions very well. Well, there's a lot of different ways weak ego can manifest. One way that weak ego can manifest is through overestimating their abilities. So they might be very boastful. So it's not necessarily the case that someone with a weak ego will always be egotistical, but it can happen. And someone with a strong ego can also be egotistical, but they're not directly related. Having a strong ego doesn't mean someone's egotistical. I just want to put that out there. Having a strong ego, a well-developed ego, actually usually means that an individual can make the proper judgments about their strengths and weaknesses and be like, oh, okay, I know that I'm good. You see, when you have a strong ego, that means you're very aware. And that's great. That's a good thing. You are the ego. So if you imagine your mind like a dark room and light as your consciousness, ego is kind of like the flashlight. It directs and focuses your consciousness. Now, you don't want to think that you're the flashlight. You're the whole room. But the flashlight's important. It's important. And the brighter light that you have, the more of the room that you can see, the grander your field of consciousness. You don't want to identify with the flashlight. That's not good. But you don't want to get rid of the flashlight or think that the flashlight is bad. So that's important there. So it says here that through Lucifer, practitioners are in essence seeking to awaken this archetype within themselves, promoting self-awareness and spiritual growth. The parallels become striking as we delve deeper into the interplay between Jung's psychological concepts and tenets of demonic magic and Luciferianism. Through understanding these psychological theories, practitioners can gain fresh insights into their practices. This cross-pollination of fields, far from being a mere coincidence, is a beautiful synchronicity. So, it's important to understand here that when we are talking about demons and we're talking about demonic possession, guess what? And by the way, I just want to mention on the topic of possession, there's a such thing as archetypal possession. So archetypal possession, we talk about all these different programs within your mind, all these different apps within your mind. Archetypal possession is one of these programs take over your mind, take over the operating system, try and become the operating system. And this can happen if you don't work on acknowledging your unconscious and integrating it and becoming aware of it. So one example of this, of archetypal possession, is, let's say that someone has an anger problem. Okay, someone has an anger problem. And you could associate some, I'm sure there's absolutely a demon that is associated with anger. So you could call that whatever that demon name is or whatever. But it doesn't matter. It's besides the point. Someone has an anger problem and they repress this anger problem, meaning they don't acknowledge it. They bury it with their unconscious. They don't even acknowledge that they have an anger problem. In fact, they don't think that they do have an anger problem. I don't have an anger problem. In fact, I don't like it when people get angry so quickly. But that's because they've repressed it. They actually have an anger problem. So they haven't acknowledged it. So it's repressed. It's in there. It's building. And at a certain time, it can take over their personality. And they might act totally out of character and punch a hole in the wall or something. And they'll say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I wasn't being myself. That's not me. That's not who I am. I wasn't being myself." And that's a case of archetypal possession. And this is what happens when you don't acknowledge your issues and work on them. If you try and hide them and shove them in the darkness, they'll come out and control your life. You have to acknowledge them. You have to go, "Oh, you know what? I do have a problem with anger. I'm going to find a way to, I've acknowledged it. I'm going to find a way to deal with it." Now you're working with it in some way. You're working with that demon. You're having a conversation with that demon. You're working with it. You're not letting it take you over. You're trying to, and you could use it in a positive way. You could, let's say, redirect your anger towards, let's say, creating a movement or something. Like you want to create some kind of like peaceful movement to protest something in the world that is contributing to the negative aspect of humanity, something that you care about. You could channel it into creativity. You could get your anger out by writing certain lyrics and maybe being in a metal band or something like this. These are just some examples. If you have an anger problem, you should definitely see a therapist and talk to them about it. These are just random examples I'm giving. Now, the issue with this is that archetypal possession can actually last a long time. I gave an example of just like a quick burst, but there are some people who become so archetypally possessed because they identify with an archetype instead of integrating with it. And this can happen a lot. Like if someone identifies with the Satan archetype, they can become possessed by Satan, which means they'll start to act in a very satanic way, which means they will act very egotistically, they'll act very selfishly, they'll act very hedonistically, they'll act whatever. It also depends on what we're defining as the Satan archetype. But that's what would happen if someone was archetypally possessed by that archetype, if we're defining it that way. So it's important to realize that these archetypes are part of us, we have these dark aspects, we have these light aspects. We have darkness within us, we have light within us, we have creativity within us, we have destruction within us. We need to acknowledge all of these forces within us and work with them. That's ultimately what we need to do. It's not about exorcising them or casting them out or vilifying them. It's about realizing, hey, there are these aspects of me and I need to work with them. I need to deal with them. And this is all what inner star actualization is about, and integration, where one is seeking to make the unconscious conscious so that they can live a extremely actualized, empowered life where you are in control of your life and you are in control of your destiny. But that's a topic for another time. So, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed this discussion on demons and found it interesting. I know I did. There's a lot more videos on my channel. Go check them out. And remember, hit like and subscribe. And if you enjoy my work, support over on Patreon. Helps out a lot. That's how I'm able to create videos and more content. So I appreciate all your support there. And you'll get access to all of our members only videos. And you can also get access to that by supporting at tier 2 or higher right here on YouTube by hitting the join button right below this video. And remember, this isn't church, so don't feel obligated to support monetarily. You don't have to, but there are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking and subscribing and sharing. And I do want to shout out everyone who does. I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much, especially to Renaissance Fairy Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Enki, Nuselina, Paul Rogers, Eric Fire, Massam, Christopher Smith, and everyone else. Thank you very much.